I'm Doug Drouxel.
Douglas Dennis David.
I'm a lecturer in music technology at a fairly large further education college in South Essex. I'm the trade union national executive member on the University College Union, and I kind of wanted to talk about a couple of points. Specifically, sort of this model of governance, talking about democracy and the democratic deficit and holding people to account in the context of free schools. If you look at further education colleges, the model of governance that they have implemented, and it was in the 92 education bill, was the incorporation of colleges. So they were taken away from local authority control and implemented as effectively a corporation on their own, away from local authority control. This is pretty much the method of governance that we're looking at for academies and free schools, and it's that. And kind of, if you look at it, we've got a number of years of we know exactly how these kind of organisations work and how accountable they are to people, how actually very difficult they are to hold to account. In terms of further education colleges, it's, I mean, I would guess, my understanding is that, well, I feel they're probably one of the worst bits of the education sector to work in. They have the worst paid people. They probably have the least level of student satisfaction. Although I'm not 100% sure, I don't have the statistics for that. I know that they're definitely the worst paid. They're also probably the worst unionised. They're probably, in terms of the way that they treat their staff, is not particularly good, and that has an impact on the quality of sort of delivery. They're also it's almost impossible for anyone kind of external to it, prospective students, that kind of thing, to really hold the governing body to account. It's, I mean, I've been negotiating with our senior management for 6 years. I've never met any of the governors. These are people that make day-to-day, like, no, they don't make day-to-day decisions, they make the large strategic decisions on what happens within their college, and I've never met them. I've no idea what they look like, who they are, or anything. It's actually almost impossible to kind of get hold of them, talk to them, kind of come into contact with them. They're very much completely distanced from the day-to-day people, the staff on the ground, or even their representatives, kind of in the form of myself as a trade union representative. And that kind of aspect of it means that sort of this free school model of governance is going to push it in that direction. There is that, one of the things I think that we're going to see is a pushing down of wages and a pushing down terms and conditions. Teachers in schools have reasonable terms and conditions and have reasonable wages. Moving away from the kind of the national contract and those kind of things will mean that it'll be pretty much free licensing to really push down terms and conditions. We saw it after incorporation from 1992 to 2004 off the top of my head. There was no, within further education, there was no kind of sort of central idea about how much further education lecturers would get paid. So there was no national kind of understanding of what kind of any kind of steps to say this is how much a person who is doing this job is worth. It was just kind of, and certainly where I worked up until last year when we sort of implemented what's now the national pay scale, it was pretty much we can get away with paying you this. And I don't think that's effective in terms of delivering quality education. One of the other issues I think is really the privatisation. Kind of my feeling is that free schools is really a push towards privatising the education sector, and that is kind of the thing that I would be most concerned about. If you look at some of the people who Michael Gove is meeting with and discussing free school plans and in fact academy plans as well, the reason why he met so many times with Murdoch is because Murdoch is planning on sponsoring a whole bunch of schools. I'm not comfortable with large companies, and that is effectively who's going to end up running these schools, large companies running schools on a profit basis, because that's what companies do. If you look at the kind of the organisations, is it the Edge Foundation off the top of my head? One of the, I think it might be the Edge Foundation or one of the others, they are a kind of a front charity organisation for a large publisher, and the large publisher publishes books that schools buy. So it's this kind of, right, let's run a school and we can just stock it full of our books. We can then end up taking the money from taxes and then buying our own books with it. It's this kind of cyclical, they're going to make a profit out of education by being the only supplier of books to that school. And just one final point. In terms of the localisation of decision making, free schools actually remove local decision making. It's a centralised system. Further education colleges are completely on the leash with central government. The way in which the funding works is not through an explicit, you will do this kind of dictatorial thing through policy and through saying this is how things work. It's through money. This is how much money you've got and this is what you're allowed to spend it on. We're not going to tell you what you have to do, but if you do something different to what we want, then we're going to take the money away from you. And it's this kind of, rather than being explicit policy decisions, which obviously the current government sort of criticised the previous government for like issuing diktats to education professionals, the current government's not doing that, but they're kind of quietly saying, you will do this, or we'll just pull all the funding. And it effectively ends up being the same thing. And in fact, where we have local authority control over schools, there's a mediator between central government diktat and the financial situation within schools. So it's not, I think it actually means that the schools are put in a less precarious position because of local authority control. Further education, I mean, I'm trying to think to a year when we didn't have a major round of redundancies within further education. It happens all the time because of the precarious nature of the funding, because the funding mechanism is what central government use to keep further education colleges under control. It's their control mechanism for them. So there's a real issue, I feel, around free schools and kind of looking back at where and how further education works with copying that model and rolling that out for schools across the board.
Thank you very much. A couple of points just to make from the chair. One of the issues is not so much profit